Hello, my name is Blue.Kiwi, and this is going to be my review of Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. So the most obvious question about Arkham Horror 3rd Edition is obviously how does it compare to 2nd Edition? And the answer to that is it's complicated. Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, I find, is a great game, but there's not a lot of story elements going on. You generally have a boss who will set cultist types, an ancient one, and maybe a few special rules. Other than that, that's your game. The way you defeat the ancient one is the same. The way you close gates is always the same. The way the ancient one spreads doom and terror is always the same. The monsters are always drawn from the exact same pool. One game of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition can be easily compared to a second game of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, even if you pick a different ancient one. And that's the biggest issue that Arkham Horror 3rd Edition resolves. Let's get into it. So, out of 2nd Edition, the first thing you'll do is select one of your ancient ones in your game. Now the base game comes with 4 ancient ones, with the expansion with the current expansion that's out, Dead of Night, adding 2 more, but I'll get into expansion stuff later on. Each ancient one comes with its own deck. So if we take Approach of Azathoth, comes with its own deck of Mythos Deck of encounter cards. These get put into a special Mythos Deck holder, after being shuffled obviously. It comes with the game, which has reminders on for drawing for clues or gate burst from the front, or doom from the back. Now when you add a clue in this game, so, does he have downtown? No. Of course it doesn't. That's not downtown, that's East Town. Okay. Pretty sure it's East Town now. That's Vale of Twilight, Simon. What are you doing? Yeah, East Town. Okay. Each location comes with its own encounter deck. So if you were to draw a clue, you would add a clue to the centre of that tile and take the top 2 cards of the encounter deck and the Mythos card, shuffle those 3 together, then put them on top of the Mythos deck of the encounter. During the encounter step, if you were to draw the clue card, you would have a chance at gaining a clue from that location. The next thing you do after acquiring the Mythos deck and after acquiring the Mythos deck for your ancient one, flip it over and recreate the board seen here using these modular board tiles. So as you can see, on a comparison level, this map requires downtown, which is in the middle here. We have the downtown tile, and it is connected with a scenic path on that side, as well as 3 other sections, but you get the idea. The left side of the Enchantment card also includes instructions for building your monster deck, your Mythos cup, and any final setup cards. So, for example, this one is add cards 2 and 3 to the codex and create the Anomaly deck using the Temporal Fissure cards. So the codex is now a stack. This wonderful stack of cards here. This is everything. So for example, the approach of other stuff, others had the 2-card deck, which is Anomalies. This reads that when a space has 3 Doom or a neighbourhood total of 5 Doom, place an anomaly token in the neighbourhood. If additional Doom will be placed in the neighbourhood with an anomaly, place it on the scenario sheet instead. If you resolve an encounter in a neighbourhood with an anomaly, you may resolve an anomaly encounter. No, you resolve an anomaly encounter instead. When it has 0 Doom, when a neighbourhood has 0 Doom, remove the anomaly. And then the 3-card, which it also instructs us to add, gives us instructions for what to do if with Doom. So when there is 3 or more Doom on the scenario sheet, flip this card, which has yet more instructions. So you play through the game, adding more cards to the codex until it tells you you've won the game. I'm following the instructions on the cards from the codex. So to do this, you have character cards, which I put down somewhere. Here. Like this wonderful lady here, Agnes Baker. If you have played any Arkham games, you'll be instantly familiar with most, if not all, of the characters in this game, both the good and evil. So, how does the game play? Let's get into it. So, the game takes place over 4 different phases. The first phase is the action phase. During the action phase, that's where you move your characters. Each of your characters has 2 actions that they can take during their turn. They can take 2 of a possible 8, I believe, not counting component actions. So, first is move. Move action is very simple. You move up to 2 spaces. You can't interrupt your movement action. If something interrupts the movement action, you stop moving. You can also spend money at a rate of $1 per space to move up to 2 additional spaces. Your second action is the ward action. Taking a ward action allows you to make a check, allows you to make a law check, which allows you to remove Doom from your space. This is a key action during the game, one that at least one player will probably be taking a lot in order to prevent Doom building up and having the bad scenario actions happen. The third action is the attack action. No, sorry, let's try it again. The third action is the focus action. The focus action will net you one of these wonderful little tokens. So, what's so important about these? This is a +1 strength token. It increases your strength by 1. Ooh, big surprise. Each character has a focus limit. So if I Agnes, you can see her focus limit here of 2. A focus token will increase the stat by 1. You can also spend a focus token after a roll, a focus token of any type after a roll, to re-roll 1 or all the dice in that scenario. To re-roll 1 or all the dice in that scenario, I believe. What's the play? Just double checking. Apologies, I do know this, but I'm kind of panicking a little bit because I'm not used to doing reviews. So I'm just double checking right now. I'll probably cut this out of the video, to be honest, but each focus. For each focus, oh yeah, you could, yeah, it is one die only. Focus tokens. I believe there are cards which allow you to reroll all of them instead, but yeah. So you can. So again, this is a +1 to a stat, and you can also use it to reroll one die during a test. Tests work exactly the same way as in Arkham Horror. In the previous Arkham Horror game, second edition, take one die per stat. You roll them, and every 5 or more gets you a success. Every 4 or lower is a fail. There's also blessings and curses, which work exactly the same way as they did in previous editions. So, that's the focus action. The third action is the attack action. The attack action allows you to engage with a monster. Like this undulating mass. When it's engaged, you move the monster. So the attack action has 2 parts. First, it allows you to engage any monster, a single monster in your space. Most monsters will engage you automatically anyway when you move into the same space, or when they move into the same space as you. But this action also allows you to take them off other players, stuff like that. When engaged, it flips over to the other side. So it starts on this side, which has its movement value, its spawning rules, and how it moves. So this one is patrol, move towards most doom. So it will move towards the space of the most doom. If it encounters one or more investigators in a space, it will engage the investigator with the lowest observation. On the back is the rest of it. So top half of the card is the same apart from this symbol. If this symbol appears, it means that defeating it will net you one of these tokens. I can't remember what I call off the top of my head. Monster. Remnant. So this is a remnant. These can be gotten. These are usually gotten from monsters. Their 2 main uses in the game are some encounters will use them as a sort of currency, as well as any character who has a remnant can spend a remnant in place of a sanity when casting a spell. On the middle line, you have its health, its combat modifier. So this will modify your combat roll by -1, so you'll roll 1 less dice, and its evasion modifier. So there's no evasion modifier. So if you're trying to evade it, you roll your observation base. Strength is obviously your attack value. You also have any special rules. So with this one, after it attacks, you discard 1 focus. A bit of flavor text, and down the bottom, it shows you what happens where it attacks. So when this does damage, it'll do 1 health and 2 sanity damage. Okay, so the attack action basically allows you to attack a monster. You roll your dice, modified by the combat modifier, and then deal the amount of successes you got in damage. So if you get 2 or more successes, you successfully defeat the monster. Don't defeat the monster, you put health tokens on it, and it will probably attack you unless you evade it. When you evade it, which brings us on to the evade action. The evade action, nice and simple. If you engage with 1 or more monsters, you roll the lowest possible modifier. So the monster that gives you the worst odds of escaping in evasion. And for each successful dice you make, you disengage with 1 monster, put it back onto the board like that, and during the monster phase, instead of moving, it'll just slip back up to its normal movement side. If you successfully disengage with every monster you encountered, you get to perform an additional action for free. Nice and simple. It's worth noting that when you are engaged, when you have monsters engaged in combat with you, the only actions you can take are focus, attack, or evade. You cannot take any other action. So, your next action is the research action. This is probably one of the most important actions in the game, as you cannot win most scenarios without taking this action at least once. So, clues. We all know clues. These are wonderful things. You use them to seal gates. In the previous edition of Arkham Horror, you use them to seal gates, and you also use them to reroll dice. The reroll dice actually is still the same, but in this edition, instead of using them to simply seal gates, you instead take a research action to attempt to put clues onto the scenario sheet. If we go back to our codex and draw a third card again, which is this one, you'll notice that we also have a clue option, as well as the doom option we spoke about last time. The clue option is when there are 3 or more clues on this card, on the scenario sheet, add card 4 to the codex. So that's the other way you advance the game. Generally, you want to put clues on the card, you want to stop doom game the scenario, but you want to stop doom game the scenario card. Clues make it easier, doom makes it harder. But most games, you'll have a mixture of both. Okay. And some games will even put other tokens onto the scenario card, but those special rules for that scenario, which will be explained by the codex. So, let's go through those actions again. Research. And there's also gather resources, allows you to gain $1. Nice, simple, easy. Some characters will have cards that are modified. There are other cards you can get that are also modified. Then you have the trade action. Wonderful, nice, easy. You trade items with an you exchange possessions with an investigator on your space. Easy to understand. If you're in the same space, you can give somebody else your possessions or take their possessions off them. I don't believe I don't believe that you need to use multiple trade actions to trade multiple items. I don't normally use a trade item action. Yep, any number of allies, items, spells, money tokens, clues, and remnants, with 1 or other investigators in your space. So if 4 of you are in one space, you can trade all your items off through them. Wonderful. Other than that, you have component actions, which are the actions printed on your cards, which includes your character cards, items, and allies. Allies do work a little differently in this as to how they did in Arkham Horror. So if we grab a random ally, not that card, but this is a perfect example of the cards I'm showing. So allies will always have a health and sanity value. Other cards will also have a health and sanity value too, like the Search for Izzy card, which is one of Jenny Barnes' base cards. So if you notice at the bottom, it has a health and a sanity value. Now, whenever you take health or sanity damage, you can choose to place it onto your character or to any other card that has a health or sanity value you own. If you choose to put it on another card, and that card would take it up to its health or sanity limit, the item is destroyed. In the case of items, there are very few cards that can restore health or sanity to them. Any encounter which restores health or sanity to yourself will also always give you the option to restore it to an ally instead. That being said, allies often have fun abilities, which by making good use of, you can make work for you. On top of that, there's also this unique items deck. This one? Yes, this one. Which, for sanity's sake, you should always keep in alphabetical order. Why? Because you'll never draw random cards from this deck. If you're taking a card from this deck, it is a named card. There is no searching the item deck for an item. If an item is specifically named, it will be in this deck. So, armed backup, once per round, at the end of the monster phase, you may spend $1 to exhaust a non-epic monster in your space. Easy, simple, done. The key here, so this is an ally from that deck. We also have jobs, and yeah, there's all sorts of things in this deck. But again, these will be given specifically by codex cards or encounter cards, depending on what it is. Some of them will be given by random encounter cards from encounter decks. Others will be given by scenario-specific encounter cards. And that's the important thing. The card that's that's the important thing. You'll never. There are always going to be some cards you cannot see, no matter what scenario you pick. For example, Leo Di Luca, I believe, is given during the Veil of Twilight scenario. Don't quote me on that. I'm not going to go looking through all the Veil of Twilight cards right now to find them, but that's how it goes. So, that's the action phase. Spent a lot of time on that. The rest of the phases are not going to take anywhere near as long, I hope, but we'll get around to it. So, monster phase, nice and simple. Monsters move, monsters attack, rested monsters, exhausted monsters recover. Job done. So, if a monster is not engaged with a investigator, it will move, or do its lurk action, or do its special action if it doesn't move. If it is engaged with an investigator, it will do its damage, as well as any other special attacks. If it is exhausted, it will flip back over to its ready side. It's nice, easy, simple. The next step in the game is the encounter step. Again, if you've played Arkham Horror, you know what happens here. You take a card from the encounter deck, you read the relevant encounter, and then resolve the effects as normal, doing any tests or whatever the card requires you to do. It's worth noting that even the street spaces, which are these ones, so there are 3 types of these, so which are residential with the little lamp symbol, scenic with the little forest symbol, and bridges with the bridge symbol. These have their own generic encounter deck called the streets, and so you have the top residential, bridge, and scenic. Other decks will have their own encounter cards. So this is an East Town encounter card, and it includes Hibbs Roadhouse, the police station, and Velma's Diner. The only times you don't draw an encounter card is if you are engaged with an enemy. If certain scenarios will also have portals or anomalies. If you find an anomaly, you draw a card from the anomaly deck. The anomaly deck will be chosen by the scenario. So this is the Yugoth scenario deck, called Yugoth Emergent. If you check on the other side, the encounter is based on the amount of doom in your space. So at 0 doom, it will remove 1 doom from any space in your neighbourhood. 1 to 2 doom, if you're successful, you remove a doom from your space. And the 3 doom, you remove 3 doom from your space and gain a remnant. That's the other way you're getting remnants. I forgot to mention that. If you remove doom from the space, if you ward doom successfully and remove more than two or more doom, you get a remnant. It's worth noting that you don't get a remnant for 2 successes. You have to remove the 2 doom. So if you get 4 successes but only 1 doom in your space, no remnant. Very sorry, but that's the way the cookie crumbles for that one. So that's encounters. We all know encounters. If you played previous editions of Arkham Horror, you know encounters. If you haven't, they're very simple. I'll just read you an example one from East Town. So this is the Hibbs Roadhouse. I'll read you the police station actually. Danny DeHono comes whistling down the steps and presses something into your hands. Hold on to this to me. Gain one common item. As Donahoe leaves, Sheriff Eagle asks you about your relationship with him. Make an influence check. If you fail, your answers will need to satisfy to neither Eagle nor Donahoe become wanted. So that's an example of an if you fail scenario. Some scenarios will have good stuff if you succeed. Some scenarios will have bad stuff if you fail test. Some scenarios will have both. It depends on the scenario. Well, it depends on the encounter. And once you've done your encounter, once everybody's had their encounter, if they get an encounter, you move on to the Mythos step. Now, you remember how we set up a Mythos cup at the start of the game? The Mythos cup is made up of these handy dandy tokens. So I'll just grab one of each. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so most simple. Fine. Does nothing. You actually managed to do nothing during the encounter step. Congratulations. Next one. Gate burst. In fact, we need to ignore that one for a moment. Instead, explain Doom. So, remember how we set up our Mythos deck at the start of the game? In our lovely little Mythos deck holder. Ta-da! When you draw the Doom token, Doom, you take the back card of the deck, you flip it over, and you look for the Doom symbol, like this one here. You then place a Doom on each space with a Doom symbol. Some spaces will be marked with 2 or more Doom. You place the amount of Doom listed, then it goes in the discard pile. It's worth noting that some cards will refer to the unstable space. The unstable space is always the card. There's always a space on the topmost pile of the Mythos discard pile that has a Doom icon. If the Mythos discard pile is open, the unstable space is a starting space, which is on the front of the scenario card. So in this scenario, it would be the train station. And then we get the gate burst icon again. So, the gate burst involves our lovely little Mythos deck holder again. I'm just going to make a quick discard pile over there. So, when you resolve your gate burst, of which there's normally only one of them in the Mythos cup, so don't panic too much, you take the top card of the deck. You put 1 Doom on all 3 spaces in that neighbourhood. You then take the discard pile that you made. You then take your Mythos discard pile, shuffle it, and then put it back of your deck. That adds a ton of Doom. That adds at least 3 Doom, and will always refresh your discard, and will put all the discarded cards back into where you're drawing Doom from. Think of it like the infection mechanic in Pandemic. So next up, monster token. You take your monster deck that you created at the beginning of the game. You take the bottom card and spawn it. So I grab a random monster card. Sheldon Human. You'll see at the bottom it says to spawn at most Doom, which means that you spawn it at the space on the board with the most Doom. If there are 2 or more spaces with the most Doom, you spawn it. You pick which one you want to spawn it at. If you have a monster which doesn't move but adds Doom to its space that's on a street, you pick a location either side of it to put Doom. I will point that out. That can be important because it means that you can spread it on up to 4. That means you can have up to 4 spaces to spread it over before you have to start resolving Doom effects. Not always the best, but it's an option if you can't get to it quickly. Next we have the headline card. So, what's the headline card? At the beginning of the game, you'll take 13 of these cards. These headline cards. When you draw a headline card token, you will take the top headline card. You will read it. So, for example, so-called Pharaoh speaks in Cambridge. Technological demonstration. Egyptian Nolacept masters uncanny science. By A. Wong, Associated Press, Boston, Massachusetts. Headline: you suffer 3 damage and 3 horror unless you gain a Dark Pact condition. So, you resolve the card. Some of them will add themselves to the codex, adding more effects on to the scenario. Others will just instantly resolve to their effects. Some will ask you to make tests. Some will ask you to just roll a die. Once you resolve the card, it goes out the game. So, back in the box. If you draw the headline token and you have no headline deck left, you add a Doom to the scenario sheet. So that acts as your game timer and will keep the game and will encourage you to keep the game moving, because the more worse you do, the more you add to the token, the more Doom you're just going to be adding to the scenario sheet later. There's little to no point in just doing that. Clue token. So, how does this work? We'll get our board, we'll get our handy dandy board. Let's see, Rivertown is the next one on the thing, so we'll get the Rivertown board. So, here's Rivertown. So, you take your scenario deck. So you'll see that Rivertown is the top card of the scenario deck. You shuffle that into your scenario. You shuffle that into the top 3 cards of the deck and add a clue token to the centre, like that. But obviously it'll be flat, so you won't be holding it. That means that one of the top 3 cards of the codex, if there's one or more clue tokens in a location, one of the top 3 cards in the encounter deck for that location for that neighbourhood will always contain a Mythos card, which will give you a chance at a clue. If you resolve the clue card, you put it into the Mythos discard pile. If you fail to resolve the Mythos clue card, you take the top 2 cards of the deck and shuffle the Mythos card back into them. If you have multiple tokens, at least one in the top next 3 cards will be a Mythos card. And finally, we have this bad boy, the Reckoning token. So, certain cards will add Reckoning effects. You'll always start the game with at least one, which is listed here on your scenario sheet. So, for each cultist monster, place 1 Doom in its space. You continue resolving Reckoning effects until every card with a Reckoning effect has been resolved. There is very few things known as a good Reckoning effect. Typically speaking, if you're resolving a Reckoning effect, it is a bad thing. You do not like these things. So, I do believe that's pretty much it for the base game. I'll just show you a couple more tokens so you know what they look like. So you see all the Mythos tokens. We also have these handy dandy Carriage Tokens. So this is a generic Carriage Token for whether an inactive and active side. So you use these to keep. There is no determined player order. You can, if you want to mess about with the player order, you can use these to keep track of the player order. You also have the Lead Investigator token, which indicates who the lead investigator is. Any effect which says the lead investigator will give you the lead investigator effect. As always, you have standees and cards and character tokens. So this is Wendy. You have standees. The base game comes with 6. I believe the expansion adds a couple more. I don't know why, because it's still over 6 characters. Health and sanity tokens. Again, if you played an Arkham game, you know what these look like and what they do. And the trackers. So these come with 2 sides. There's a question mark. There's a hidden question mark side that all trackers share. So I have two different trackers here. They also have a flip side. So this is a white tracker, this is a blue tracker. Certain scenarios will have you place trackers. Sometimes they'll be hidden, sometimes they'll be public. But they typically mark important places or things you have to do in the game, or things you need to discover in the game. For scenarios that use anomalies, you have anomaly counters. These lovely little counters will drop onto the centre of the neighbourhood, and if one of these is in play, you draw from the anomaly deck rather than the neighbourhood itself, and any doom that goes into the neighbourhood goes on the scenario sheet instead. Okay, so I believe we've covered most of the base game, pretty much everything that you need to know to understand the base game. And then as for the expansion adds 2 more investigators. Let's just flick through here from the bottom. So it adds Schizo Tool and Kate Winthrop. Oh, apparently 3 or 4. Dana Stanley. Just keep flicking through until we get that thingy. Roland Banks. And that's it. So 5 new investigators, I believe, or 6, one or 2. It also adds 2 new scenarios other than the base 4 that the game comes with. Shots in the Night and Silence of Tsuga. That's a few more token types, mainly these 3 clues or 3 doom tokens, and doubles all the encounter decks as well. It also adds another 20 cards to the codex. Yeah, 20 cards to the codex for the 2 scenarios in that game. And generally just more of everything other than actual location boards. The new expansion coming out on Friday, from when I'm making this video, does add, I believe, 2 more expansion boards. I'm not 100% sure. I've not been reading a lot of it because I don't want to be spoiled. But I believe it adds at least 2 more location boards, which means 2 more encounter decks. And the first expansion also adds this wonderful little... I'm missing part of this as well. Woo. There it is. This wonderful little monster deck holder, which works in a similar way to the Mythos deck holder, which comes in the base game. But it's mainly there to help you draw from the back of the deck, since you're drawing from the bottom normally for monsters. Okay, I believe that covers everything. So let's move into the next bit, which is going to be a little more complex. Pause the video while I move everything off my desk, so we can chat about that. So, the important thing: should you buy this? Should you buy this over Arkham? Should you buy this if you already own a Arkham Horror 2nd Edition game? Is it better than Arkham Horror 2nd Edition? So, on a personal level, for the third question, the answer is yes. I prefer story-based games. I prefer games with an actual narrative, and well, I aired my complaints at the beginning of this video about the original Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. I'm not a big fan. I like the game, I like the ideas behind the game, I like the theme of the game, but every game in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition just feels like the same thing. There's never that much of a new thing, especially if you don't own any of the expansions. It actually feels like a different game. Yeah, there's certain scenarios that add in new monsters that aren't normally in the game. There's certain scenarios, and most scenarios will have a different type of cultist, and there'll be special rules about about certain things you can and can't do. But in general, you're running around, you're blasting gates. Your goal is to either shut down X amount of gates, or to allow the Ancient One to be summoned, or to summon the Ancient One and defeat it. And I hate to say it, but eventually that gets boring. Now, the obvious argument is that most games of Arkham Horror 3rd Edition will start out similarly. You'll run around, you'll collect clues, you'll try to advance the codex through clues rather than through Doom. But the true beauty of the game lies once you've gone through a couple of those cards. You start reaching points where simply putting clues onto the scenario sheet isn't enough. There's different scenarios that even have points where you have to start doing things and spending the clues on the scenario sheet to actually perform the actions you need to do to defeat or seal away the Ancient One. Not to mention the fact that the cards which allow you to win the game before the Ancient One is summoned generally don't go away when the Ancient One is summoned. Which typically means that if the Ancient One is summoned and you don't feel that confident in your ability to take it on, you can usually manage to defeat it by simply resealing it away, rather than having to fight it and potentially die and lose. The standard rules apply for the original Arkham Horror for Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Once the Ancient One is summoned, typically speaking, you're not going to get any more Investigators into the fight. What you've got now is what you've got. But like I said, it doesn't tend to remove the Codex cards, that allow you to win by reinforcing seals and stuff like that. So it can be a great scenario breaker to just carry on with what you're doing. Have someone distract it, but carry on with what you're doing. Don't attempt to fight it. Silence of Sasuga actually has a great method of doing this, where it will be summoned at one end of the map and work its way towards the other. But you do have the option, but until everything is destroyed, you do have the option of continuing to weaken it through performing the actions that were weakening it, that were making it weaker before, which makes the final fight which can make the final few steps even easier. It's a risk because it's on a space which it will destroy eventually, but if you can get it done, you can knock a massive chunk of its HP out just by doing that. Which, given that it adds the elite modifier, which allows it to just keep on gaining, which gives it even more experience for the amount of investigators in play, is great. That being said, it can fall flat. It can feel a little too methodical, it can feel a little too puzzly, and once you've gone through its scenario a couple of times, it can become bland and unexciting because you already know what's coming. But it's... Personally, if I'd have had the option between this and Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, back when I bought 2nd Edition, I'd have brought this. And I'd have been satisfied. I've played this a hell of a lot more than I've played Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, and I still find it's fun and engaging most of the time. Usually when I'm playing with other people these days, but I'm hoping that I will have some help with that on Friday. Like I say, the expansion comes out then. The first expansion doesn't add that much more. I mean, 2 scenarios, 5 investigators, bunch of new items and spells and stuff, and double the counter decks. Okay, tell a lie. It adds a lot more than it sounds. I mean, simply doubling those encounter decks adds a ton of replayability back into the game, and you don't even. And the beauty of it is, it's not unique to the expansion scenarios. You can keep those double encounter decks in any scenario, and they will work because the generic encounters are still great. The downsides. So, you have to if you want items, you have to understand where to get them from. Typically speaking, there are icons on the map. So you can see here, general store shows that you can spend money for items from the item deck. Graveyard is usually strength or will checks for money or remnants, and the Black Cave is usually lore or will checks for for spells and artifacts. Curios. Yeah, curios. You do still have display like you did in Eldritch Horror. 5 cards from the standard item deck put to one side, which you can buy, given that you are given the option to buy them. Typically, though, you'll be given the option to purchase any common items, purchase any curio items, blah blah blah. You get the idea. There is also the option of, if you gain an item and you don't like any of the items in the display, you can draw from the item deck until you get an item of the type that you get. But that's completely random. You have to take the first one that meets the criteria. The biggest actual complaint, and this is going to sound petty and annoying, but it's the fact it comes with the standard Fantasy Flight Valley box style. I mean, I brought a insert for it, which holds everything nice and neat. Card insert, which is falling apart. Great. Card insert for the little cards. Yeah, I've got some wood glue for that. But that showed how much I played this. That showed the fact that the insert, which held together great, is falling apart due to the amount I'm pulling it in and out of the box. Shows how much I enjoy playing this. Other than that, I don't really have that many complaints. It's the little niggly things, like I say. The fact that the game only comes with 6 dice. More often than not, you've got modifiers that allow you to go beyond that. We've crying out loud, Tommy Muldoon alone starts with a Tommy gun. I mean, Tommy's got a base strength of 5 as it is. And the Tommy gun, no, Michael McGunn, not Tommy Muldoon. A boiler, Chicago TIE Fighter. They've got a base strength of 5, he gets plus full strength from a basic item. Even with your standard -1 modifier, that's still 8 dice he's rolling, and the game comes with 6. It's one of the pettiest complaints I can think of, but it's annoying as hell when you've forgotten to bring your dice with you, when you've forgotten to bring other dice with you. I really wish the game had come with something like 10 dice or something. But, you know, I can live with this. Like I say, it's a petty complaint. It's one I'm having to reach for just to find an actual complaint I can think about for this game. Am I looking forward to more from this game? Yes, absolutely, 100%. One of the things I didn't go into details when talking about the monster decks is that each scenario will give you a list of monsters to put in the deck. So like this one is Abyssal Servant, Corpse Taker, Eyeless Watcher, Hooded Stalker ×2, Masked Ones, and all ghoul monsters. That means that if an expansion adds in more ghouls, that deck gets bigger, which frankly is great and something I'm looking forward to. Something that will hopefully come to fruition, something I'm hopefully looking forward to. Other than that, I just like how the game keeps going. The Mythos cards, the Mythos decks alone, are great callback to the clue decks from Untitled Chapter, which were very thin, very small, but gave it scenario-specific encounters for clues. It's a great callback to them. They are often really well tied together into the scenario. Yep. So for example, Veil of Twilight, this one I'm reading now, all three of them have something to do with magical items hidden around town, which is very much in the theme of Veil of Twilight, that people are buying and selling magical items, and you need to investigate who's selling them. Sorry. And frankly, it's great. The fact there's 24 cards expands, it allows each scenario to have its own distribution of doom, which it can control through the amount of each neighbourhood. Distribution of doom includes which it can control through the amount of neighbourhood in each deck, doom symbols printed on each neighbourhood. And it's just like, it's not, again, that was one of our biggest complaints with the original game. The Mythos deck itself was way too underwhelming. Every location that was possible to have a monster, to have a gate spawn on it, was marked on the map clearly for you to see. Which meant that every location that could have clues, every location, these locations were ridiculously important. They were given very little weight in the encounter cards because the encounter cards had to be generic to match every available scenario. So they were given very little weight in the encounter cards, they were given very little strength overall, and they were just there to act as somewhere for gates to go, which the lore this game revolves around has been built up a lot over the years. It may have started in the 1920s with Lovecraft himself, but many people have added onto this lore. And to see that lore taken so frivolously, so generically, in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, as somebody who has read a lot of the Cthulhu mythos, it was painful to watch. It's painful to see how little the game cared for the story. It just name dropped characters, it just name dropped locations, and in the end you don't feel like it's you call investigators, but you move around, you find clues just by ending your turn at the location the clues on. You close gates by jumping through them, doing random encounters until you find a way out, and ultimately and in a scenario with something like the silver in a scenario where the Silver Twilight Lodge should be the main antagonist. You're fighting mummies, ghouls, and vampires in the streets. That's not what Arkham Horror is, and this game perfectly encapsulates it. Yes, you have a couple of generic monsters that tend to find themselves into a lot more encounters than they should, a lot more games than they should, but they're very few and far between. A lot of the time when you're adding the monsters into an encounter deck, they're there for a reason. For example, in the Shots in the Dark encounter, you have ghoul cultists. You have ghouls and ghoul cultists, and they're in the game not because they're generic, but because that's the sort of cultist that Nolothep, who is behind it all, uses. He's using these cultists and these ghouls to manipulate the scenario from behind the wings. So you start the scenario investigating a gang war, and then move on to, if you do things right, you move on to a scenario where you've got a gang war which has been manipulated by outside forces to cause massive death and destruction in the name of a great evil. And it's fantastic. You actually feel, going through the codex, reading the flavor text on the codex, you feel like you're investigating. And that makes all the difference in the world. You feel, yeah, sometimes, you get there the hard way, but you can combine your clue cards, the cards you get the clues from with the investigations you're running, and you feel like, in a way, you feel like your characters have put it together. Or it's all fall apart underneath them, and it's all just come crashing down on top of them. Assuming that you're failing miserably at everything. But still, that's great, because you're failing miserably, but the plot's still progressing. Yes, it's not progressing the way you want. It's progressing completely and massively horribly. For example, in the gang war scenario, it's getting out of control. Gangs are fighting each other in the street because you can't because you can't figure out what the hell's going on with these gangs that have coexisted peacefully for years, minus the odd scuffle, and are now in an all-out gang war. And you can't figure it out, but you get enough information through the bad codex cards to figure out that even if that's all you're getting, you can still figure out what's going on. In a way, you can figure out that someone manipulated it from behind the scenes. Not to mention the fact that that scenario alone, I'm just going to get you one of the final scenario cards for that scenario, actually. So this is the... Yeah, so this is scenario card 49. Wipe them out. This is if you sided the Sheldon gang against the O'Bannons and then win. So, Riley finally falls, toppling a baccarat table as she hits the ground. While the blood seeps from her wounds, her eyes shine and fanatical at visions of something unseen. Her eyes shine clear and fanatical at visions of something unseen. The Clover Club is quiet. The O'Bannons have been routed. Sadie Sheldon counts out your share of the cash, looted from the gambling den, cackling wildly as an O'Bannon grunt groans in pain at her feet, her knife in his belly. The Sheldon gang has regained their complete dominance over Arkham's underworld. It secures your own trace of the trusted ally of the gang. The Sheldon gang and loyal allies have won the game. In the mad celebration, your blood cools when you catch sight of Corbin Bouchard, the Sheldon lieutenant. With a face masked in darkness, he chants a foul liturgy. Nolothep shall put a semblance of men, the waxen knights in the robe that hides, and come down from the world of seven suns. You've ended the war in Arkham, but have your efforts merely been in service to something more dangerous? And that's great. You've won the game through routing an entire gang. It's a victory no matter how well you count it, because you've just destroyed an entire street gang in Arkham. A place overrun with crime and villainy. But something lurks, something's still there. And you walk away from the game with the feeling that, yeah, you've won. But have you? Really? And that's a feeling that I feel that Arkham Horror should give you. That Arkham games, that any game in this mythos should be able to let you walk away with the feeling, yeah, I've won. But have I?